What if I told you? There was a man who started selling chewing gum door to door at the age of 6. And one day, he became the most successful investor the world has ever known. A man who never built a tech company, never wrote a single line of code. And yet, he sits on top of a financial empire worth hundreds of billions. He reads 500 pages a day, lives in the same modest house he bought in 1958, drives a regular car, eats McDonald's for breakfast. And yet, billionaires bow when he speaks. This isn't the story of money. It's the story of wisdom, patience, discipline, and a belief that character is more valuable than currency. Warren Buffett. A name whispered in the halls of Wall Street, revered in classrooms at Harvard and Wharton, and respected in the homes of everyday people who simply want to retire in peace. But behind the quiet smile and soft voice is a story you've never heard. A story of rebellion, of mistakes, of heartbreak, and redemption. He was once rejected. He was once misunderstood. He even thought he was going to fail in life. And yet, somehow, he became the Oracle of Omaha. This is his story. Not just how he made money, but how he found meaning, how he stayed true to his values, in a world that worships greed. So sit back, because what you're about to hear might change the way you look at time, money, and life, forever. August 30th, 1930. Omaha, Nebraska. The Great Depression had gripped America. Jobs were disappearing. Banks were collapsing. But in a small white house on Farnham Street, a boy named Warren Edward Buffett was born. His father, Howard Buffett, was a stockbroker and a future congressman. A man of conviction. A man of principles. He believed in integrity over influence. Warren inherited more than his father's name. He inherited a hunger. Not for food, but for numbers. By the time he was 6 years old, while other kids played with toys, Warren was selling Coca-Cola bottles and chewing gum door to door. He wasn't chasing money. He was chasing curiosity. At age 11, most kids were still figuring out multiplication tables. But Warren, he made his first stock purchase. 3 shares of Citi Service Preferred. Bought at $38 a share. The price dipped to $27. Warren panicked. But he held on. When it climbed back to $40, he sold it. A small profit. But days later, that same stock rose to $200. Warren learned something that day. A lesson that would shape his empire. The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. Even at a young age, Warren Buffett understood the value of waiting. He read a lot. Not cartoons, but books on investing, economics, and business. By the time he was a teenager, he had devoured every finance book in the Omaha Public Library. At age 13, he filed his first tax return and claimed a $35 deduction for his bicycle. At age 14, he bought 40 acres of farmland with his own savings. He wasn't born rich, but he was born with the mindset of the rich. His childhood wasn't perfect. He was shy, socially awkward. He struggled to make friends. But in numbers, he found companionship. In compound interest, he found magic. He didn't want to grow up to be popular. He wanted to grow up to be free. And freedom, to Warren Buffett, meant doing what you love every single day, without needing to impress anyone. He had his eyes on one thing: building wealth, not for show, but for peace. Warren Buffett's rejection from Harvard felt like the end. But in reality, it was just the beginning of everything. Because that rejection letter pushed him towards Columbia University. And there, he met the man who would forever change his life. Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing, the author of The Intelligent Investor. Graham didn't just teach Buffett how to analyze stocks. He taught him how to think rationally, logically, without emotion. Buffett was mesmerized. Here was a method to find undervalued companies, buy them with a margin of safety, and let time do the rest. Warren devoured the teachings. He graduated and made a bold move. He asked Graham for a job, but Graham said no. Most would have given up, but not Warren. He returned to Omaha, started teaching night classes on investing, and began building his own capital, one small investment at a time. Eventually, Graham called. "Warren, I've got a spot for you." Buffett moved to New York, worked under Graham for 2 years. He was just 24. But the seeds of his empire were already growing. After Graham retired, Warren came home. And in 1956, with just $105,000 from friends and family, he launched the Buffett Partnership Ltd. His mission? Use Graham's principles, but refine them with his own instincts. Warren didn't just look for undervalued stocks. He looked for great businesses, run by honest people, at reasonable prices. And it worked. By 1960, he had grown his fund exponentially. But something else was about to change everything. In 1962, Warren discovered a failing textile company in Massachusetts, Berkshire Hathaway. It was outdated. It was losing money. It had no future in textiles. But Warren saw something. Not in the business, but in the shell. He bought it. And with it, he planted the flag of what would become his empire. Berkshire Hathaway would no longer be a textile firm. It would become the vehicle for Warren Buffett's investment vision. He used its cash flow to buy companies, insurance, retail, banks, railroads. From Geico to Coca-Cola, from American Express to Dairy Queen. He didn't just invest in businesses. He bought them, held them, trusted the people running them. He wasn't a trader. He wasn't flashy. He was patient. One of Buffett's greatest turning points came not from numbers, but from love. He married Susan Thompson, an artist, activist, and the emotional compass of his life. Susan wasn't just his wife. She was his anchor, his guide. The reason Warren never lost himself in the world of wealth. In 1977, Susan left Warren, not in anger, but in search of her own path. They never divorced. They spoke often. They loved deeply. But they lived apart. For the rest of her life, instead, he poured himself deeper into his work, into learning, into thinking long-term. In the 80s and 90s, Buffett's philosophy came into full bloom. While others chased trends, he held strong. And then came one of the most legendary deals in history. Coca-Cola. Buffett bought over $1 billion worth of Coca-Cola stock in 1988. And never sold it. Why? Because he believed in the brand, in its moat, in its timeless appeal. That single move made Berkshire billions. Buffett was now no longer just a smart investor. He had become a cultural icon. Behind every great success story, there are moments the world never sees. Warren Buffett, the oracle, the genius, the icon, was also a man filled with doubts, regrets, and scars that success could never hide. He once said, "It takes 20 years to build a reputation, and 5 minutes to ruin it." He wasn't just talking about others. He was talking about himself. Let's start with his biggest mistake. Dexter Shoe Company. In 1993, Buffett bought Dexter Shoe for $433 million in Berkshire stock. He thought it was a solid business. But it wasn't. The company collapsed. The industry was taken over by cheaper imports. And those shares of Berkshire would have been worth over $10 billion today. Buffett later called it the worst deal of his life. I gave away 1.6% of Berkshire, forever, for nothing. He wasn't afraid to admit his failures. But they haunted him. Because he wasn't just losing money. He was losing time. Another one of Buffett's blind spots. Technology. For decades, Buffett avoided investing in tech companies. He didn't understand them. He believed in simple businesses. So, while others bought Amazon, Apple, and Google early, Buffett stayed away. It wasn't until the 2010s that he finally invested billions in Apple Inc., one of the few tech bets he made. And it became his most valuable holding. But that hesitation cost him trillions in potential gains over the years. His relationship with Susan Buffett, though full of love, was also full of distance. Susan needed emotional freedom. Warren needed stability. She moved to San Francisco. He stayed in Omaha. They remained married. But they lived apart for 27 years. And yet, she still loved him deeply. She even introduced him to Astrid Menks, a waitress who became Warren's longtime companion. All three shared a unique bond. A love not defined by tradition, but by trust. Still, the pain of Susan's absence never truly left Warren. When she passed away in 2004, he was shattered. He cried. Alone. In the same house they had once shared. The same house he still lives in. Throughout his career, he also faced criticism. Why didn't he give more to charity earlier? Why didn't he speak up on social issues? Why did he keep investing in fossil fuels? Warren always responded with patience, with humility. He didn't chase applause. He chased results. But deep inside, he carried guilt. Guilt for not spending enough time with his children. Guilt for letting work become his refuge. Guilt for not saying I love you more often. In interviews, he often reflects not on money, but on relationships. When you get to my age, you'll measure your success not by how much money you have, but by how many people truly love you. He made mistakes. He missed chances. He failed people he cared about. But that's what makes him real. What makes him human. Because even the greatest investors can't predict life. Failure didn't end Warren Buffett. It refined him, sharpened him, made him better. Because unlike most, Buffett didn't fear being wrong. He feared not learning. And learn, he did. In the early 2000s, he began to see the world differently. Less as a spreadsheet, more as a legacy. He started investing with a new sense of responsibility. A desire not just to grow money, but to guide minds. And then came a bold move. Apple. A company he once avoided, he now embraced. In 2016, Buffett shocked the world. He invested over $35 billion in Apple stock. Not for the tech, but for the brand. The simplicity. The user loyalty. It was more than a financial bet. It was a philosophical shift. Warren had evolved. And Apple? It became Berkshire Hathaway's most profitable investment ever. But his greatest triumph wasn't Apple. Wasn't Coca-Cola. Wasn't even Berkshire Hathaway. It was giving it all away. In 2006, Buffett made history. He pledged to donate 99% of his fortune to philanthropy. Not after he died, but while he was still alive. He didn't want statues. He wanted impact. That same year, he joined hands with Bill and Melinda Gates to launch the Giving Pledge, a movement urging billionaires to donate at least half their wealth. Over 240 billionaires signed it. From Elon Musk to Mark Zuckerberg. From Richard Branson to Mackenzie Scott. But Warren wasn't doing it for headlines. He was doing it because he believed something most billionaires don't. If you're in the luckiest 1% of humanity, you owe it to the rest of humanity to think about the other 99%. And that changed everything. Buffett's wisdom started reaching beyond Wall Street. He became a household name, not just in finance, but in life. He gave timeless lessons at every annual shareholder meeting. Never risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. Someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. People listened. People learned. People trusted him. And in a world drowning in greed, Buffett's voice was different. He didn't promise quick riches. He promised peace of mind. And peace was something he had finally found. He began writing heartfelt letters to shareholders. Not filled with charts, but with clarity. He mentored the next generation. Charlie Munger, his lifelong partner in wisdom, stood by his side till the very end. His billions, his investments, his genius, or something much deeper. Because when you look past the headlines, the charts, the shareholder letters, you find a man full of surprises. Let's begin with this. Warren Buffett has never owned a smartphone. He still uses a flip phone. He once said, "If it were up to me, I'd still be using a rotary." He doesn't have a computer on his desk. No personal email. No social media. And yet, the entire financial world follows him. He still lives in the same house he bought in 1958. In a quiet neighborhood in Omaha. He paid just $31,500 for it. Why? Because it has everything I need. Why would I want more? He eats breakfast at McDonald's, drinks 5 cans of Coca-Cola a day, and plays online bridge for hours. He doesn't live like a billionaire. He lives like a wise old friend. And his wisdom? It's filled with humor. When asked how he stays young, he joked, "I eat like a 6-year-old. I've been told it's a miracle I'm alive." But don't let the humor fool you. Because beneath the jokes is a man of profound discipline. Every day, he reads for 5 to 6 hours. Annual reports, books, newspapers. No distractions. No noise. Because to Warren Buffett, knowledge is compound interest for the mind. But here's something most people don't know. Buffett was terrified of public speaking. So much so that he once dropped out of a college course because it required giving a speech. So what did he do? He enrolled in a Dale Carnegie course. Practiced relentlessly. Faced his fear head-on. And today, he says the Dale Carnegie diploma is the most valuable degree he's ever earned. Not his Columbia degree. Not his billions. But a certificate in confidence. Another unknown truth? Buffett doesn't believe in dynastic wealth. He once told his children, "I'm giving you enough so you can do anything. But not so much that you can do nothing." He didn't raise spoiled heirs. He raised grounded human beings. His children, Susie, Howard, and Peter, all live modest lives. All work in service-driven roles. Because that's how Warren raised them. And when it comes to politics, Buffett has always leaned quietly toward justice. He supports progressive taxes, advocates for better education, and often says, "My secretary pays a higher tax rate than I do. And that's not fair." He's a capitalist, but a compassionate one. And that's what makes him rare. In 2008, during the global financial crisis, Buffett didn't flee. He invested. While the world panicked, he stepped in with calm. Saving companies, restoring confidence, America's economy looked to a man in his late 70s for hope. And he delivered. Even in his 90s. Warren Buffett is still writing letters. Still investing. Still showing up at the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting. What people now call the Woodstock for capitalists. People fly from around the world to hear him speak. Not for stock tips, but for life lessons. Because Warren's legacy isn't just built on money. It's built on integrity, simplicity, patience, and love. Love for learning. Love for people. Love for living a meaningful life on your own terms. He doesn't run to meetings. He walks slower now. His voice is softer. His hair thinner. But his mind? Still razor sharp. And in those quiet moments, he reflects. Not on his net worth. Not on the Forbes list. But on time. Time, the only currency that never refunds. He's not afraid of death. He's afraid of wasting life. And so, he shares. Not just knowledge, but wisdom. He tells young people to read. To think for themselves. To marry the right person. To surround themselves with people they admire. He tells them this. You only have to do a very few things right in your life. So long as you don't do too many things wrong. Buffett is not a perfect man. He has made mistakes. He has known heartbreak. He has cried, and failed, and doubted himself. But he never stopped learning. Never stopped listening. Never stopped caring. And that is why his story matters. Because his life is not about numbers. It's about values. In a world that tells you to be louder, faster, richer. Warren Buffett reminds you to be quiet, patient, and kind. In a world chasing likes. He chased principles. In a world selling shortcuts. He built a life on the long road. And you know what? That long road led somewhere beautiful. He once said, the best investment you can make is in yourself. And maybe that's the real takeaway. That you don't have to be born rich. Or brilliant. Or bold. You just have to believe in something. And give it your whole heart. Read more. Think long-term. Trust yourself. Live simply. Love deeply. Give generously. That's the Buffett way. A way that's not just about building wealth, but building a life that matters. In the minds of students. In the letters of young investors. In the lives of those helped by his generosity. And maybe in your life too. Because if you've listened closely, you didn't just hear the story of Warren Buffett. You heard your own possibilities. Your own dreams. Your own inner voice saying, maybe I can do it too. Maybe I don't need to be perfect, just consistent. Maybe it's okay to go slow. Maybe, just maybe, I already have everything I need.